Hello and welcome to BioRules video lessons. Today we are going to be talking about fish or fish stock and more specifically fish population. This is a good example on where population ecology can be directly used in the management of ecosystems and economic systems. Fish is a big part of the protein intake of many countries all over the planet. So a big part of the diet of the population is based on seafood. As you can see here on the fish diet here, we see that globally, the red one over there, fish eating is a big part of the diet of people. Of course, not beyond red meat, starch vegetables, but quite close to poultry, which is chickens and dairy. So it is part of the diet. The fishing has increased in the 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, increased, but by the end of the 20th century, by the year 2000, it starts reducing, it started declining. Part could be because of people might not be eating so much fish, but actually part is because the population of fish is getting depleted, is getting reduced. So, because of that, it's important that we should be able to discuss population ecology of fish. And one way would be to describe methods used to estimate the size of commercial fish stock. There are two ways for us to find out how much fish is out there. One is fish yield. Okay, we know how many boats are going out there, how many hours they're going to be spending fishing, and then we see how much they caught. So this gives us an idea on how much fish is still there. Another method that's more direct is to use the capture, market, liberation, recapture that saw before. So actually, fish seems to be a little bit difficult to paint on, but actually we can put a tiny little hook on the fatty place on its back, and this hook is going to stay there. And when this fish is caught, there will be an email address there and a telephone that people can contact to say, I got a fish, it was this size, this big. So they ask for people to measure and send information. And once scientists manage to get this, they can sense the size of the population of fish. Okay. Once we know the size of populations and this stuff, now we can start playing the population. We can start seeing how much we can catch. Fish population behaves as any other population. Now, a natural fish population, if they are let in nature, they are going to behave like this. If the population is very small, it tends to grow exponentially. Then it may go to a transition and reach a plateau. So, what would be a sustainable yield? How much should we be catching from the fish population? So, let's say that we have a population of fish that's like that. How much should we catch? So, the environmentalists would say that we should catch a little. So, we put a small pressure fishing design. So if you put a small pressure, reduce the population by that amount. Not much, a little bit. And then, this during a season. And then, the population takes the remaining of the year to replace the loss and go back to the plateau again. And then, the same pressure year after year and replacing. And then, this here would be a small fishing pressure. This here is quite fantastic because it does reduce the fish population. The population is still there, but the economic systems are going to be saying that they are not fishing enough. That there are more fish over there and they are not making enough money. So there will be this discussion if they should be able to fish more. So let's see what happens if we put a non-sustainable fishing yield. What happens if we put a very big fishing pressure in that fish population. So the fish population is in the plateau and we put a very large pressure on them. What's going to be happening? The population is going to be reducing to a certain amount because we caught lots of them. Okay, but we still caught, and this population is still by the end of the exponential phase. So it's going to be reposing. Yeah, it replaces almost everything during the remainder of the year. But then we fish again the very large pressure, and it goes a little bit down now. And then it replaces, it's going almost back. But then it goes there, and I believe you already can see where this is going. Every year it's reducing, but this is more than the population is capable of replacing, up to a moment that you zero the population is over, the population got extincted. It happened to some species of fish like sardines in the United States. It almost happened that with cod in the North Atlantic, with the flounder. So those fish, they need to be managed. So this is not going to happen, because if it goes like this, the fishing population collapse and the fishing industry also collapse. So that's not good for anybody, not for people that are fishing, not for people that are trying to conserve the fishing population there. So what would be the ideal? Ideal would be to put a maximum sustainable yield. So what's the maximum that can be fished, but still making it sustainable? So one of the ideas to fish a certain amount, it's quite a lot, it's that amount over there, and reduces, no, that's quite a lot. You fish almost 1/3 of the population of the fish, and with that amount, the fish are capable of going back to the plateau, and then you can fish them, and they stay around a certain number because they just got to a size of population that they can be replacing every year, and they go back to the place. So this is the maximum sustainable yield. However, some people are going to be criticizing this method, saying that if there is a fluke and the population don't manage to recover itself during a certain year, then the next year you may deplete it. So it would be interesting to not fish exactly the maximum sustainable yield, but a little bit less than the maximum sustainable yield. Another graph that's quite interesting to show this is placing the fishing effort on the x-axis and the yield, or how much yield or how much is the cost that you're going to be having fishing there. So basically the idea is, if we put a little bit of pressure, it will cost a little bit to fish. If you put more fishing effort and more and more and more, it costs more and more and more. So there is an increase in the cost if you fish more and more and more. So actually we shouldn't be fishing indefinitely, because there's a moment that it's not worth it. So what happens to the yield? If you put a little bit of fishing effort, you fish a little bit. If you put more, you're going to be fishing more and more and more. And see, this is going, and this seems to be quite pretty, because it's very far away than the cost for the fishing. So the companies are making money here. Okay, but this yield is reducing. The more effort we put, there is a moment that we get to a maximum yield, and is not going to get much higher than that. And then what's going to be happening? This here is a maximum sustainable yield. But actually, if you let the companies to go fishing, they tend to fish all the way where the cost balance in the yield. So they try to fish as more as they can, and they end up getting all the way to here, which put more effort but doesn't produce an overall very good result, because from here on the yield is reducing. So it wouldn't be a very, very good idea. And actually, there are people that argue that this point on fishing here, this amount of effort here of days, is not the best effort, because actually the difference from this value to the fishing cost over there is quite high, but not the highest. Actually, if we stopped fishing before, if we stop fishing at this amount of days here, we are going to have the maximum economic yield, which is good for the economy, for the industry. Is the fishing that would be the best number for the fishing companies to make more money, and also doesn't deplete the population as much. So the balance nowadays is between the maximum sustainable yield, or a little bit less than that, trying to get to the maximum economic yield. And if you do that, it will be better for the business, and it will be better for the fishing population. Okay, so the problem is that for you to control how much fishing is going to happen there, this should be regulated, because of course one company wants to fish more than another company, and so they end up having problems. So we need international measures to control fishing. And why is that? Fish tend not to respect country boundaries. No, here, this fish is Brazilian, so it's going to stay in the Brazilian waters. No, fish from Brazil migrate to Uruguay, Argentina, to Africa. So they don't respect country boundaries. They don't stay in our country. So we need to to pay attention not only to our fishing in our country, but also the fishing in other countries and also fishing in international waters. Okay, so it's difficult to control fishing in international waters. That's a fact, because every navy from every country, if they have a navy, is capable of taking care of the fishing in its waters. But when they go to international water, theoretically, they cannot patrol it anymore. It would be needing an international force patrolling international waters to be able to control fishing over there. Okay, so which measures are viable to be done? Okay, one of them is to limit fishing. Okay, limit fishing in your country, limit fishing in international waters. So there are ways for us to do this. One is to limit the season. Say, okay, companies, you have 1 month to fish. So if you limit the season, you are limiting the amount of time that are allowed to be fishing. You let the remaining of the year for the fish population to recover. Or you can also limit areas. Some areas are not going to be allowed fishing, like the example I showed in previous lessons on Laje de Santos. That area is not allowed to fish, so the population there is improving. There are some preserves already in place in the North Atlantic where it's forbidden to fish. So the cod population and the flounders population, they are recovering there. So there's another way for you to limit the fishing, not allowing fishing to happen everywhere. You limit some areas not to happen. And another way is for you to limit the yield, how much can be caught. So if you put a limit on the tonnage that can be caught, then you can limit that. There are different ways for you to control the yield. One is maximum tonnage. You say, okay, the maximum amount of fishing allowed in this country or every country or whatever is, you put a number over there. Above that number, okay, they have to stop fishing. Okay. Another way is for you to put the minimum fish size. Say, okay, you can fish, but you cannot catch fish that are smaller than a certain size. Okay. How do we do that? Okay, there is a technique of return that can be used when you're fishing with line or with small nets. But if you're fishing with gigantic industrial nets, by the moment you get the net out, most of the fish that are there are already going to be dead. So the suggestion for that is for you to limit the mesh size. The mesh has to be above a certain size. So the big fish are caught and the small fish are capable of escaping. So if you do that, and if you have a proper study on the size of the mesh to catch a certain size of fish, you are capable of catching what's in there, and you limit how much is going to be caught. Okay. In international waters, you need international cooperation, and actually in some countries you also need international cooperation, because maybe there's a country that don't manage to have a navy to control the fishing in its borders, and then people go there, they fish the fish that can also be here in my country, and then they come here to sell into our ports. So we should be tracking fishing with an international cooperation, not only for fiscalization of the fishing, but also to ban the selling of fish above a certain limit or below a certain size. So if this is done, there is a hope that we will be able to keep fishing and to be able to keep feeding people, taking resource from the sea. Okay. I don't know if you're aware of the Sea Shepherds, but the Sea Shepherds, they got famous because they were against whaling, but now they have the biggest navy, private navy in the world, and they are applying their efforts. They are lending their boats to countries that don't have a navy to fiscalize fishing. So if you want to see a little bit more about their work, I suggest you go there, because now they are helping many countries in Africa that don't have money to keep a navy to fiscalize illegal fishing. And they go there together with soldiers from those countries, and they apprehend fishing boats that are fishing illegally, and then they get those boats and they take to the port and they stop the illegal fishing. So a good idea to take a look on this group. There are many groups that help protecting fishing, but this is one very famous that you can take a look. Okay, so here now we have a few questionnaire for you. One questionnaire, a few questions for you to see if you got the idea of fishing and population ecology. Have fun.